And I'm really curious. What was your road to the media world and the world of filmmaking as well? And were there any like defining things that happened in any time of your life feels like, yeah, this filmmaking thing is, oh, I'm really into this, or this is really my calling to me.
I grew up on a farm in up on the Murray River, and I was always taking photographs and painting and doing various creative things. I think probably responding to the environment around me, the natural world. And when I came to the city, I studied engineering, which is very different to anything creative.
Yeah.
But I found it very dry, so I found my way back into creative things. In that case, it was student theatre. So I started acting in theatre, then that led to directing, and that led to getting some experience on people making short films, seeing how short films work, working in various different roles. And I was sort of compelled to want to tell my own story. So my once I started working on those short films, my interest kind of at that point headed towards wanting to make some work, some short films. So that was me with my friends writing stories and then working with the people whose films I'd worked on to make my first short film. And it was probably from then that things started to snowball. Me realizing that once I started traveling with this film to festivals and meeting audiences, and getting those responses, that's when I realized this is something I'd really prefer to be doing than engineering. So it was around that time in my early 20s when I started making more short films and eventually made the decision to quit engineering, and go full time into working creatively. That was a few things like taking photographs on the side for events to make money, um, doing some lower budget commercials that would pop up my way, but in the background, continuing to make short films, sending them to festivals, building a profile, and working, I guess, towards writing a feature film and wanting to do bigger films. So that's how I kind of got started and motivated to make films.
While making all of these films and short films, I heard that you worked with sound engineer Robert McKenzie, who has had some pretty critically acclaimed work. I've heard on like Hacksaw Ridge and won some Academy Awards and stuff. And that's really cool. So, how did their approach to like sound design and their approach to this sort of thing that you've worked with so many times, how did that affect your filmmaking process?
Robbie was one of the first people that I collaborated with on my very first short film. Um, Back when I was still doing engineering, I met him. Gosh, how did I meet him? I think I went into a post production facility called Sound Firm in Melbourne and said, I'm making a short film, it's low budget, can you help me? That usual thing. But basically was being polite, being charming, asking for help. And they said, yeah, we can help you. And they put two people on the project to help me do my sound design. And one of them was Robbie. So he did the sound design, part of the sound design for my first short film, but he also knew I needed a composer. So he stepped in and composed the music, um, for me. So I've had a collaboration from that film pretty much through all my films since, with Robbie. And I would go to him early on in the project and script stage and say, hey, this is what I'm thinking of doing. How can we, perhaps when we're filming, what should we be looking out for sound design? Or we would just experiment around ways of filming scenes so that the sound became a character as well. So that when we got to post production, it wasn't a matter of just doing the sound at the end. It was prepared from the beginning, from script, then a considered approach through production, and at the end, it was another level of creativity. Um, and that's been pretty, yeah, as I said, pretty much through all my short films with him. As he's gone on to do bigger films, he brings great experience back to my projects and says, "Oh, look, I learnt this from working on Hacksaw Ridge, or working with Wonka Wai. What if we try this?" So he's been a really really strong creative collaborator through my whole career.
Are there any forms of media that you take inspiration from while making film? And this can be from, and also art and stuff like you feel passionate
Mm.
about. And is there a certain way that you put your ideals or show that you made it yours in your
Mm.
projects?
I think for me, I just feel it becomes mine through my passion or my curiosity, or those things combined, and my interest in wanting to explore stories my own way. Because ultimately, I do look at. I mean, everyone looks at other references and is inspired by other things because that's what we do as humans. We grow up in a world where things in fact affect and inform us and they inspire us, so they invariably become part of what we create and how we create. But I think it's a subconscious thing. If you've got your own passion to tell your own stories your own way, all these other things feed in involuntarily. So, like you said, paintings as well. Paintings, poems, sketches, other films, photographs, things that I might think are appropriate for a project. I'll present them to my sound designer, or I'll present them to my cinematographer or my editor in pre-production and say, hey, this feels in the world of where I'm wanting to go. And that helps us have a discussion so we kind of are on the same page. Like, oh, you want to look at Gregory Crewdson's photographs for the way we compose our wide shots. Great. So that'll inform the lighting, the atmosphere, the tone, and maybe even the editing rhythm as well, because it means we want to hold on these longer shots for the whole scene, so we're not cutting back and forth between tight shots. So all those visual references are important in the early stages of project development. And then as you go along, as I said, you form your own creative approach, but they're kind of starting points or they're triggers for discussion with your team as you collaborate.
What does the process from start inspiration all the way to obviously I heard that you were working on Canopy and you filmed Little Tornadoes at the same time, and then you worked on Little Tornadoes for I think it was quite a while. I'm not sure how long, but I did read that it was quite a long time working on that. What does that process sort of look like with all the collaboration with your team and everything like that?
Yeah, that's quite a rare. There's no typical way to make a film, and it was quite a rare way of going about making a film. But with that project, I set about making a film with enough money to film, and we filmed those two chunks, which eventually became Canopy and Little Tornadoes, and they were basically part of a bigger project, different chapters, different time periods, 1942 and 1971. And it was in the editing stage where we realized we kind of had enough to make two films, but we also we needed to raise the money to do post-production. So we started with one film first, and that was Canopy. And then we got it finished and got it to, thankfully, accepted to a big festival, Toronto. And we screened that. And then we traveled with that film for 2 years. And then in the meantime, before I got back to the second film, I needed to make some money. So I did some commercials, and I managed to do quite a bunch of good commercials around Australia, Southeast Asia. So that just took more time. So it pushed back the completion of Little Tornadoes a bit longer. So by the time we got around to looking at the edit with my editor, Cindy, it was a few years down the track. And then it was a process of applying for funding to get the film completed. And that was its own, laborious task. So I think it just took a long time because of various distractions, struggles managing money, but ultimately persisting with the goal of finishing it and finding out how to put the pieces together with whatever money we could raise. I mean, there's a lot of films by Wong Kar-wai, the Hong Kong director. His films kind of a famously non-traditional way of being completed. If you research his film In the Mood for Love, I think it took him a year or a year and a half to film that. So he started filming, and he kept filming for about 3/4 of a year. Then his actress had to leave to go to another project. So she left, and then he kept working with the other actor, but he started a new film, and that was months down the track. And then when Maggie Cheung was available again, she came back and they finished that first film. And so that's a fun example of how films are made in weird and wonderful ways. I definitely wouldn't choose to make my film over a decade, but that's how it turned out to be.
In media, film, art, and basically the whole world, there is a large discussion now times entering like a whole new age of technology that artificial intelligence is considered a large problem for some people a positive thing or some people a negative thing. What do you think about its role or what do you think its role could be in this sort of world, or should it be in this sort of media art world at all?
It's a good question because a lot of people fear just hearing AI, and I think AI can mean so many things. There's AI in our phones, in our in microwaves, in everything around us, in how we communicate. I think for me, it's about how do we work with various forms of AI, be it sort of video generation or words, how to work with it as a tool, and how to let it help us and streamline things and make our process more efficient, but at the same time still allow this intense collaboration and team effort that is filmmaking to happen. Um, it's so hard to predict what's going to happen because you look from month to month and the video generation gets more and more incredible, doesn't it?
Yeah.
So you could conceivably make a film with just an AI software with someone in a room prompting over and over and over. But from a personal level, there's nothing more magical than being on set with great creatives with great talent in front of the camera, and the spontaneity that comes from a script that you've written, but it comes to life on the day. It comes to life not through people saying exactly what's written. It's the moments between the lines, the nuance, the detail, the spontaneous changes that happen on a set. And that's all fun, but also it means the product becomes really organic and fresh and original. It's nothing that you can really predict or prompt, So I think there's still going to be a place for original storytelling, humans creating films. It's just going to take a different form, and an AI will invariably have a role in various different departments, from production right through to post-production, of course, even in development, like in script, having it be almost like an assistant to bounce your script ideas off. But ultimately it can't create the script that you have in your head. You can only do that. You can only sit down and get out what you want, and it becomes an assistant for you. At least that's how I see it at the moment. Yeah.
Well, do you think there's a big ethical or moral problem that is going on in this sort of film world right now that you try to fight against or fight for in some cases?
Yeah, it's a hard one because it's very hard to police how you use things like AI video generation, for example. Because once you've got the genie out of the bottle, it's hard to put it back. I think it's going to come down. It's going to be a period of time where we'll be in a state of flux where we want to figure out how do we use this. People will try things, it'll go too far, it won't be right, then we'll pull it back. I just think it's so hard to predict how we're going to be using it and what the best way to use it is. But I think we can't ignore it. And if someone says ethically, you have to disclose that you used AI, or we don't want to accept or talk about a project that used AI, that's a bit crude and closed-minded. I think we have to accept that it's out there and it's here to stay. It's how do we best make films with, I guess, the best interests of the team at heart, the people writing the projects, working together to collaborate to film and to put the film together at the end in post-production. How do we work together as a team and use AI as a tool in that process rather than replacing key roles? That feels like where we're at the moment. But who knows what it'll be in 5 years' time. It is fascinating to see what it's doing. It's just also, at the same time, it can only react to what we've created in the world before. It can't create something new. And humans are incredibly, adept at, out of nowhere, creating something completely original. We do it with music and film and photography, across the arts. And you can't predict that sort of thing. So I think there's still a place for original, for ideas from humans. It's just how do we use AI as a tool in and amongst that.
You've been directing for at least, from what I've seen, like almost 20 years now. Starting with like Rendezvous, I believe was made in 2003, and now to your most recent project, Little Tornadoes, which was 2021. What were like the biggest changes in your own work and experience over that time? Not just that, but also technically, obviously, there's been a lot of changes. And How does someone doing all that work and all those projects in that time adapt to that?
I think it's exciting with the changes in tech. From just, I mean, camera's one example. Shooting my first film was 35 mil on film stock. Then it was 16 mil. Then it was a mix of 8 mil and digital, and it's been digital mostly since then. Dipping back into film just for experimentation or sort of mixed media. But I think when digital first came out as a viable medium, there was a fear, oh, people can just shoot whatever they want. But I think as a creative, you still need to be disciplined about what you shoot. You can't just spend the whole day filming. You still have limits with time, with budget, with crew and cast. So you've still got to be disciplined about what's the creative, what's the story you want to tell, how you want to capture it. So the medium ultimately becomes irrelevant. You use the medium to capture what you want, but ultimately you've still got to figure out what's the story you want to tell, how do you want to tell it, and be very focused about that. I think there's wonderful opportunities with the changes with the advantages in tech to experiment more. I think that's what I've found. You have more time to experiment in production and in post-production especially. I can be with Little Tornadoes, for example. I was doing VFX for the film at the same time as 3 other people were. We were doing it all remotely during COVID. I was also doing sound using Pro Tools, sending that to my composer, back and forth, again, all remotely. And then I was doing editing tweaks here while my editor was in Footscray. So those are things that we couldn't have done 20 years ago. They're experimenting that, I guess, gets to the point much quicker, allows us more time to really play and explore and flush out new and interesting ideas. But yeah, we couldn't have done that when I made Rendezvous because we didn't have the ability to send large sound files or image files. We didn't have Zoom. We didn't have the software to be able to play around like we can now. So I think the changes in tech have really been, for me personally, a great way to experiment more and be more collaborative with my crew and my post-production team.
And with this like copious amount of experience, like I said, have you noticed any sort of instances, not just in your life, but in anyone's sort of experience when creating a project, sort of like quote unquote rules or like things that have been pushed onto people that you think shouldn't be so relevant in the sector of film?
Yeah, look, you've always got stakeholders. Let's call them stakeholders, be them film investors or funding bodies, or in commercials, agencies and clients that will be have a strong vested interest in the final product. So just in commercials, for example, you get a brief in, and you write a treatment, and you're one of often 3 people that pitch on a project. And if you're successful, the agency and client obviously like your creative approach. But then when you're developing or filming, they want to check everything along the way, the storyboards, the framing, even the clothing that's being used and the color palette, and they want to see all the casting reels to help select with you. So they're very crucial along the way, and you've got to make sure everyone's involved. But sometimes it means that they might change their mind, or they might not understand something you're putting forward. So you have to think, well, they may not be creatively minded. So you have to put things in a way that explain your vision a little bit clearer, or make the reasons why you want to do things sort of really heard. So it's all about communicating what you want to do, but also adapting when things adjust or they want to change direction, which does happen. How do you still create the project that you're all set out to do with all these changes that are going to happen along the way? So it's not about, I think for me, it's about leaning into the collaboration, empowering those people you're working with, the stakeholders, the agency or the clients or your investors on your films, letting them in on the journey as you go, so they feel that's a shared vision with them as well, rather than going so far down the track and then feeling surprised by something and then wanting to change it just because they feel left out of the loop. So that's for me is the big thing. Keep everyone creatively involved, so you're on this shared journey, and there's less chance then of conflict and disruption to that process.
One last question, and this is directed at all other sort of people who are really into this sort of the media world in general. What do you think? Any advice that you could give these sort of people about projects and making film?
It's constantly evolving and shifting and changing, and while in one regard you mentioned AI, things are changing and people can go, oh, we're losing this and we're compromising that. But also I think new generations come through and they see new opportunities, new ways of doing things. So I think it's always being optimistic, being curious about what's happening, about curious about ways of telling a story, looking outside the box. And if you have obstacles along the way, how do you get around them? And for me, it's always about what's the solution? How do I find a solution to this problem? Rather than complain about something being in my way or something not happening. Keeping optimistic and working towards solutions, because that's helped me get my films made. Everyone makes films in different ways. Everyone's got different stories. Everyone's got different voices and they've got different points of view. So the main thing I would say is focus on how do you tell your point of view? What's the best way you want to do that? And find the right people to work with to communicate how to do that best. That would be my my thoughts. That's across all creative media. It's the people you work with and then figuring out the best way to communicate your point of view.
Thank you so much for letting me have this small little chat about your projects and your opinions on things, and it has been so great to be able to speak with someone with this much experience in media, and I'm just want to say how thankful I am for that.
Thank you for reaching out, and let me know if you need anything further. But excited to see how it all turns out. Well, get out and make things. That's the biggest thing. Just to be out there and making, because a lot of people will talk about making things, but even if you're making mistakes along the way, you're still, if you're making stuff, at least you're out there creating and trying things, experimenting, and having your voice heard. Yeah.
Thank you so much.
All right. Take care. Good to chat with you.